So this morning, Christians around the world are trampling on the new covenant, making a mockery out of it and grave disobedience to our Father in heaven and Yehoshua, Messiah of Israel. It was prophesied that this was going to happen all the way back in the days of Isaiah. You can go to Isaiah 24 and look at verse 5. Start in verse 1. Behold, Jehovah will make the earth empty and make it waste and turn it upside down and scatter abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with his maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower. In other words, man, woman, and child. The land, verse 3, will be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled. Now, if you watch my last video, you will know who is going to be utterly spoiled. The ones who persecuted Israel, the ones who persecuted Zion and Zionists. Because Jehovah has spoken this word, the earth mourns and fades away, and the world languishes and fades away, and the haughty people, yes, the haughty people. Remember, 2 videos ago, I showed you the difference, the statues of Ecclesia and Synagogue on Notre Dame. And Ecclesia represents the haughty and the proud, the great harlot of Babylon, and Synagogue represents the lowly, downtrodden Zion. The haughty people of the earth now do languish. The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. Why? Because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broke the everlasting covenant, which is the new covenant. For this reason, a curse has devoured the earth, and them that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. You can scroll down and look all this. Look at all this. Verse 20, it says the earth is going to reel to and fro like a drunkard. It's going to shake. It's going to be a great earthquake. And it shall come to pass in that day that Jehovah will punish the host, the armies of the great ones that sit on high, the most numerous armies, and the kings upon the earth, of the earth that are upon the earth. And they shall all be gathered together, those kings, into a prison, as they are gathered into a pit, and they will be shut up in a prison, and after many days they will be prosecuted. And the moon shall be confounded and the sun ashamed, when Jehovah of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob gloriously in that time. So how have the Gentiles broken the new covenant? Well, first of all, we need to look for, it is not, all right. Isaiah 49 and verse 6. So this servant that Jehovah has hidden like a sharp sword in the shadow of his hand, this servant is the testator of the new covenant. And he says, I have labored in vain. Because, well, first of all, in verse 3, it says, you are my servant, for in Israel whom I will be glorified. And then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for nothing and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with Jehovah, and my work is with my Elohim. And now says Jehovah, that formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob back again. Well, in order to bring Jacob back again, there has to be a new covenant. Now, with that new covenant, though it says, though Israel not be currently gathered, yet I will be glorious in the eyes of Jehovah, and my Elohim shall be my strength. And he, Jehovah, said, it is a light thing that you should be my servant to raise back up the tribes of Jacob under the new covenant. That's not good enough, he says. For him to expend his life for Jacob, not good enough. And to restore the preserved of Israel. That's not good enough for the new covenant. The new covenant must be greater. But I will also give you for a light to the Gentiles. So the new covenant was opened up to the Gentiles as well. But make no mistake about it. As you read in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, and Hebrews, yes, the words of Paul himself expound upon the words of Jeremiah. In Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12, that the new covenant is indeed for the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And as a side note, because this honorable act was done, Messiah would also become a light for the Gentiles, that you may be my salvation to the ends of the earth. But wait a minute. It says here, where I was once, that the inhabitants of the earth broke. Let's see, it's in, what was it? It's Isaiah 34, I believe. 24. It says right here, it says in verse 5 that the earth is also defiled on the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. Now, when we read in Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12, that the old covenant was temporary. It had to be replaced with the new covenant. So this is clearly talking the everlasting covenant is the new covenant. Well, how have they changed the ordinance? Well, in what way? Well, first of all, let's look at Exodus 31, verse 13, the old covenant. The old covenant was exclusively for Israel. All right? And in verse 13, it says, speak you also to the children of Israel. Does it say speak to the Gentiles? No. It says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbath you shall keep, because it is a sign between me and you, Israel, throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Jehovah, that does sanctify you. So the Sabbath was not given to the Gentiles. Okay? And clearly in the book of Acts, the implication is there. The Gentiles were only given 4 things to do. That they abstain from idolatry. That's carving graven images and bowing down and worshiping them. Fornication. Shedding blood and eating blood. I think that was it. There were 4 things. Okay? But what have the Gentiles done? They shed blood, they commit fornication, they eat blood, they shed blood, and commit idolatry. And they even went further than that. They went and replaced the Sabbath, which was only for Israel, with Sunday worship in honor of Baal, the god of child sacrifice, which Western civilization participates in on a daily basis through abortions. Okay? They have transgressed the laws. They have transgressed. Let me go ahead. I think I need to go ahead and find that. Let me see if I can remember how it was written. Let's see. Trying to remember. No, it's in. Give me a minute here. I have to think about this for a minute. There it is. Acts 15, verse 29. So these were the commandments that was given to the Gentiles. I forgot what the verse was. 29. We'll go to verse 27. We have sent unto you Judas and Silas, who shall also tell you the same things by mouth, for it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay upon you no other burden than these necessary things, that you abstain from meats offered to idols, which Christians are doing today right now. When it's talking meats, it's talking about foods. Celebrating foods in honor of idols, Ishtar and Baal. And from blood, that is bloodshed and blood meats. And of course, Christians have participated in bloodshed and eating blood throughout since the Crusades and beforehand even. And from things strangled and from fornication. Not only Christian nations committed fornication, literally and figuratively, they have added sodomy to the sin of fornication upon their own lands. And he says, from which if you keep yourselves, you will do well, I'll fare you well. All right, so we go back to Isaiah 24, and clearly we see that they transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broke the everlasting covenant. And that is the reason why a curse is going to be upon the earth. Now, Paul. Well, first of all, let's go here. The Gentiles and even the Israelites in the old covenant, the sign between Jehovah and the Israelites was to observe the Sabbaths, plural. But in John 13:35, it says right here, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Question, did Christians, during the Crusades, have love for one another. No. The Sixth Crusade proves that point. How they went and sacked Western Rome, went and sacked Eastern Rome. But throughout the Crusades, they murdered and pillaged and raped the Jews, who are the elect for the patriarch's sake, as it is written in Romans 11. That's not love. That was supposed to be the new covenant sign. Then they went and added Sunday worship to try to make that a sign. And it is a sign. It is a sign of a covenant between the Christians and the false sun god, Baal, who is the devil. Today, they are adding to the sin, adding sin upon sin. Paul had something to say about this. What was the first thing in Acts 15? That you do not sacrifice to idols? Look, verse 29, that you abstain from foods offered to idols. In other words, idolatry is forbidden. That's number one for the Gentiles. And what did Paul have to tell the Corinthians? Verse 14, wherefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. Now, if we go down here, in verse 19, it says, what say I then? That the idol is it anything, or that which is offered to in sacrifices to idol is it anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice to, they sacrifice to devils or the devil. So if it is not for Jehovah's sake, it's by default the devil's and not of Jehovah. And I would not that you should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of Jehovah and the cup of devils. You cannot be partaker of Jehovah's table and the table of devils. Are we going to provoke Jehovah to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Why did he have to say that? Why? It had to be addressed because they were wanting to have it both ways. And today Christians are no different. They want to have it both ways. And now they reject Jehovah and Yehoshua entirely and replace their names so that they can blot their names out of their minds forever. Well, the names have not changed, even though Christians have tried to make it change. That you love one another. Well, did we not read Okay. Look what happened to Israel. In Deuteronomy 31 and verse 20. We'll start in verse 14. And Jehovah said unto Moses, behold, the days are approaching that you must die. Call Yehoshua and present yourselves in the tabernacle of the congregation that I might give him a charge. And Moses and Yehoshua went up and presented themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation. And Jehovah appeared in the tabernacle in a pillar of a cloud, and the pillar of the cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. And when Jehovah said unto Moses, Behold, you shall sleep with your fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after other gods, the gods of the strangers of the land, where they go to be among them, and they will forsake me and break my covenant, which I have made with them. And then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, that are not these evils come upon us because our Elohim is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they have wrought, in that they turned unto other gods. Do you Gentiles think you're better than Israel? You think you can get away with it when the children of Israel couldn't get away with it? Don't they stand a chance, a better chance before Jehovah than you, the Gentile? Paul says so. We'll go look at the words of Paul in Romans 11. Verse 17, and if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them, not against them, with them partake of the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. Because if you boast, you don't bear the root, but the root bears you. You will say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off, and you now stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear, because if he spared not the natural branches, he's not going to spare you either. Well, guess what? The words of Moses in Deuteronomy 30 are accurate. They boasted against the branches. They became enemies of the branches. They hated and they persecuted the branches. And Moses said that in the days that Israel is saved, that Jehovah is going to pour out these plagues, these curses upon those that hated, that persecuted Israel. It is written in Deuteronomy 30. If you care to look, restoration promised. Verse 7, and Jehovah your Elohim will put all these curses upon your enemies and on them that hate you, those who persecuted you. And you shall return and obey the voice of Jehovah to do all his commandments, which I command you this day. There's no getting around it, folks. What's happening right now is a thumb in the eye of Jehovah himself, a thumb in the eye of the Messiah himself. The persecutors of Israel are doing this right now as I am speaking. A sinful and a horrible thing. Thinking they can get away with it when Paul said in Romans 11, you're not going to get away with it. Out of haughtiness, out of boastfulness, breaking the 4 commandments that were given to the Gentiles. It will not go unpunished, folks. honoring the sun god, honoring Ishtar. It is an abomination to Jehovah, and it will not go, these acts are not going to go unpunished. It just won't. And quite frankly, if you want to know the truth, what happened to Notre Dame portends the future of Roman Christianity.